Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am Hassan and I'm back with another episode. This is episode 6 of season 2 of Ihsancast. And as ever, on this series, we're doing guest shuyukh who are coming on to discuss pertinent issues and crucial issues within our community and our society. And we have with us today um, uh, a fantastic guest and someone who I've been thinking about for a long time to get on the podcast, and that is Shaykh Shammas. And many of you who watched the previous podcast with Sheikh Sajjad, Sheikh Shammas is a very dear friend of Sheikh Sajjad's and is a senior lecturer and co-founder of the Sacred Text Syllabus. He has studied the Islamic sciences rigorously under one of the top scholars of the United Kingdom and in fact of the West, Sheikh Mufti Rasul Baksaidi. May Allah preserve him. And alhamdulillah, he's done fantastic work with the sacred text, and we'll get on to some fantastic new projects which he's been doing, and please stay tuned for that. But I've got a really interesting discussion today, and the discussion today is going to be something which we've all seen, we've all heard, and we've all kind of thought, what's going on with this? And that is conspiracy theories, right? And in the Muslim community, and especially in uh, the subcontinent, love a good WhatsApp chain message. You know, the Pakistanis, I think, love using it. So we see a lot of this, and we see a lot of conspiracy theories, and especially now with the coronavirus and the vaccine being released, and we had things like, did the Chinese do this on purpose? Did they create it in a lab? Is it there to kill all of mankind? And then we have obviously Sheikh, Day of Judgment comes up, and all of these kind of issues. And now we have the vaccine cases where we have videos regarding the kind of vaccine, and people are forwarding those, saying, be careful, they're trying to make you impotent, they're trying to kill you. They have put some sort of liquid chip in the vaccine, and that is a way of them knowing. I mean, I didn't even know that was possible, but according to some people, that is possible to do, which they will inject into you, and you will therefore become a slave of them. They're using a process of genetic cloning, and they're going to clone your DNA, even though they're injecting into you and not taking something out of you. But I mean, we can go into those things later on. But you see all of this, right? You see all of this news and all of this information and whatnot, and it's like, well, as Muslims, what do we do? What do we do? Because a lot of the time we see people just forwarding these things without really much knowledge about it. But also, what is the impact of forwarding these things? What is the impact of going into conspiracy theories? And we're not saying that some of them may not necessarily have some weight to them. We're not going to say that every single one of them is incorrect and every single point that's mentioned is incorrect. There may be some truth in it, but how do we navigate our way around that? And that's what we're going to be discussing today, inshallah, with Sheikh Shammas. Um, so Sheikh, just on conspiracy theories, and as Muslims, how should we react to conspiracy theories? And Islam being a religion which is meant to be and is a rational religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a rational faculty. And it is also an evidence-based religion. This is why we have the Quran and the Sunnah and Islamic laws based upon evidence. It's not just opinions. So how do we navigate ourselves around all these conspiracy theories that we have, and why have they become so popular? Where the mass general public really believe in this stuff.
Yeah. First of all, assalamu alaikum to all the listeners, and thank you for the invitation. It's a real honor to be part of this. I know it's a growing podcast, and you've got a growing kind of listener base. So inshallah, may Allah give you all success. I mean, this topic is an interesting topic, and I think that's a big question to start with. What is? I'd probably want to rephrase that and say, well, what is the fascination with conspiracy theories? Why are they so attractive? Is this something just fundamentally within human nature that we just need to fill a void? So wherever there's an absence of knowledge, we just need to somehow own it.
Mhm.
Is that the reason why conspiracy theories are so attractive? And if that is the case, then why is it that some of us are more prone to them than others? Why are some people more susceptible to to following this, I guess, way of things
Mhm.
over others? Um, and for me, that's an interesting question. That's really trying to look at the psychology of human beings and be well beyond my skill set, my expertise. So I can really comment on it from more of a personal experience and try and connect that back to the Deen. Um, so looking at it from an Islamic point of view, how should we engage with conspiracy? How by conspiracy I mean in order for something to be conspiracy, there has to be a normative understanding of something.
Mhm.
Conspiracy exists. It's like a void.
Yeah.
So there has to be a normative understanding of something, and then there has to be enough of a gap that is, or enough of an unknown for someone to decide that actually that there's an opportunity there to be able to fill that with disinformation. Um, so um, so kind of going back to Islam and how it engages with conspiracy theory, there's a beautiful narration that Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu an, he mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's speaking about this idea of spreading falsehood. He says the Prophet said, that one of the shall I give you an example of a shall I give you an example of a lie, an obvious lie? And Ibn Mas'ud said, yes. He said it's to spread something without verifying it. This is a hadith in Sahih Muslim, and there are multiple hadiths. In one where the Prophet ﷺ said, it's sufficient to lie to spread something without verifying it. So conspiracy theories are fall into this category of information that's completely unverified, that exists within the realm of possibility rather than the realm of evidence. And what I mean by that is, it's like I always give the example when I'm teaching hadith. The example I often give is when I'm looking at things like academia and academia's approach to hadith.
Mhm.
It's like saying, I'm going to come to, I'm going to go to Hassan's house, for example. Um, the assumption would be that I'll go through the normal channels. I've probably asked for, there's been an invite, or at least I've requested to come to your house. I've eventually turned up to your house. I've knocked on your door, or I've called you. There are conventional ways of interacting with somebody, being able to knock on their door. Um, the void, though, is I haven't explicitly said why I went to your house. I haven't explicitly said whether I asked permission or not. I haven't explicitly stated even how I got into your house or whether I did or not, right? So
Mhm.
the conspiratorial mindset is that it finds the gaps
Right.
rather than filling it with the normative of that's what human beings do. When I say I'm going to your house, I'm hopefully going to knock on your door, not climb in through your chimney. Whereas the conspiratorial mindset is, yeah, but he didn't say that he was going to go knock on his door. He didn't say he was going to ask permission and so on. It's a bit of a silly example, but it's a way of looking at that kind of conspiratorial mindset. Is wherever information is given, as long as there's a void, and there invariably is a void, there's always going to be, whenever you're talking about something in the future, there will always be a gap. You know,
Mhm.
uh, that mindset, what it does is it revels in that gap, and it fills it with information that it kind of, this is the realm of imagination where you can make it whatever you want it to be. And often with that sort of mindset, it's quite it catastrophizes. So it's
Right.
never a positive. This is the interesting thing about conspiracy theorists. It's never that you fill that void with something really positive, and the best possible outcome. It's always the worst possible outcome. I think this is where it links back to psychology. I
Mhm.
think human beings, there is a fundamental desire in human beings to know, to understand. This goes back to the Quran. The Quran tells us that it's within our nature, it's our desire, and it's the reason why God created us, is that we come to learn, we come to know, so that we may know God, right?
Mhm.
So that tells us a lot about our psychology, that we have this desire to understand. when when that information isn't available to us, or or if we're not comfortable with the source of that information, um, or in some cases there just is that tendency to try and take a take a left turn when everybody else is going in the same direction. You create your own bubble of information. So there's a mindset of individuals who create these conspiracies, which is, I think this is, I mean, as you probably need somebody who's far better versed and qualified in psychology to talk about this in a bit more detail. But at a very superficial level, we all have a need to know. We all have this understanding of normal social hierarchies,
Mm-hmm.
of this idea of, I guess, conformity to the establishment. And then there's a mindset which rejects the establishment, it rejects the status quo. It has the same desire to know, but it doesn't have the same conformity, and therefore it seeks out. And unfortunately, the nature of human beings is that the unknown is a very dark place for us. If you leave humans to it's like, if you go to your doctor and he says, I think I need to refer you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your mind doesn't think, oh yeah, that'll be fine, he'll refer me, it'll be the best possible outcome. You immediately think the worst.
Yeah.
That's the way we're wired. And unfortunately, when conspiracy theorists, um, when they're given that space, they catastrophize. And
Right.
the problem is that catastrophe doesn't stay within that bubble. It fans outwards and it starts affecting society, and it's done through, unfortunately, mediums like WhatsApp and other social media platforms.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. Just kind of they want to break out against the status quo, and human beings always want to have a reason when sometimes there's not really a reason or concrete kind of reason behind it. Um, and also that links in with kind of academia and hypotheses and whatnot, which I think you were alluding to at the beginning.
Mm.
Um, but an interesting kind of
Can I
thing.
also,
Yeah,
sorry to cut you off. It's just
yeah.
because a thought hit me as you were saying that this is not this is not a modern issue.
Mm-hmm,
This has been around for millennia. So one
mm-hmm,
simple example of it is in hadith, because in hadith this was quite common, that there were scholars that would seek out the obscure opinions, the obscure hadith, to the
mm-hmm,
point that the likes of Imam Ahmad and Imam Malik and later Imam Khatib al-Baghdadi and others actually talked about these people, and used to say that these people are people of bid'ah, innovation, because they seek out the shadh, they seek out not the deviant, but the opinion that goes against the normative opinion that everyone
yeah,
accepts. So there may be five hadith which explain something and flesh it out, and really you can make sense of it, and it's how everyone practices their deen. And then there happens to be this one obscure hadith that is somewhere up in the mountains that somebody happens to have,
mm-hmm.
and there were people that would go out seeking that hadith,
Okay.
and scholars had to comment on this and say this is a problematic mindset, because you're not interested, unfortunately, you're not interested in the words of the Prophet. You're interested in seeking out the obscure opinions to almost elevate yourself, to really, there's an ego element to this, which is,
Yeah,
I'm the first to discover this contradictory opinion.
yeah. Um. Okay. And it kind of leads on to what uh I was kind of thinking was the fact that you've mentioned these hadith specialists. Okay, so the great Imam Ahmad, of course, everyone knows he is one of the imams of hadith. Imam Malik, of course, is the same. Khatib al-Baghdadi is, of course. These are the leading scholars of our tradition in hadith, and are real specialists. Um, who were also revered by their communities as well, though. Were massively respected by their communities in terms of, Imam Ahmad wasn't 100%, is uh, regarded as was a saint amongst his communities. He was almost a saintly figure in his community in Baghdad at the time. Uh, people had a lot of real respect for the specialists of their field, and therefore if they came out and they said, well, no, this is the way. For instance, what you've said is that, if they show the five hadith, for example, the example that you've given, they show the five hadith and say, look, this is the standard position, and this is why it's the standard position, and that's why that's the irregular position.
Mm,
Um, People would accept that without a problem. But from what we're seeing now with the digital age, and there's a mass amount of information out there, it's a real information age. We've seen the almost a decline in the trust of specialists, and I think that's across the board. Whether it's non-Muslim academics, whether it's scientists, or whether it is Muslim scholars, we've seen this decline in trust uh, uh, about them. So, for instance, with the COVID-19 issues regarding vaccinations and whatnot, you will see a lot of people who discuss this and say, well, oh, but these scientists that are in on it, they're not objective. They don't know what they're talking about themselves. Look how many things they've got wrong, etc., etc. Don't trust the word they say. Um, and I'm sure you've got these issues as well, of course, in the Muslim community when it comes to scholars as well. I mean, if you just want to comment on this issue that we have of first of all, where we taking our knowledge from, and second of all, um, the decline of trust in specialists across the board. We're not just talking about non-Muslim scientists, where we're talking even in the Islamic sphere, the decline in trust of even in scholarship.
mm, mm. That's a very big question, and it's a very interesting question. What's happened? Why is it that Muslims have seemingly lost faith in scholarship? And I think you've touched on that interesting point about the wide availability of knowledge, information, not knowledge, but information. And what that means is there's been a democratization of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that term knowledge, but really what I mean by that is just the availability of data and information. But the problem is that to the layperson, data is information, and information is knowledge. It
Mm-hmm.
actually takes a lot of depth to appreciate that knowledge is very different. Knowledge gives you an insight that not only makes a positive difference to the people around you, but it makes a positive difference to you. That's the nature of intrinsically the nature of knowledge, is that it has a profound impact on you as well as those around you. The nature of information is it has an impact on those around you. And the nature of data is that it's meaningless. It's meaningless because it's like saying, it's like this screen here is just pixels. Data is just sets of pixels that mean nothing until you can configure them in a way that makes it meaningful. And the people that do that, or the systems that do that, have to be have to be wired in a way, they have to be configured in a way so that they know how this ultimately this pixelation or this picture should look. Anyone can try to turn data into information, but not everyone is able to, not everyone can. The problem that you have is in the current, I guess, the climate that we're in, is who decides whether the picture you're looking at is the right picture or not. In other words, when you have two people on the internet and both of them are espousing a particular view,
Mm-hmm.
how do you decipher which of those is credible or not? Now, the immediate thought is, well, you look at the credentials, do they have an ijaza or not? And my argument there would be the ijaza is a functional system in a society that adopts it as their method of delineating, the method that where the ijaza is a recognized as a system of organizing,
Yeah.
creating a hierarchy.
But also, is it the case that it would have to be a singular system? Like, it would have to be like, you can't have the Ijaza system alongside, for instance, the degree system or something. It would have to be an
It,
Ijaza system, and that's the standard.
yeah, the ijaza system only works when society adopts and conforms to the rules of the ijaza system.
Right.
So in a way, in a way, the ijazah system is meaningless if society rejects it. You know,
Okay.
doesn't appreciate, doesn't want it. That's just. I'm not saying that's how it should be. I'm just saying that's unfortunately how it is. You know,
Right.
so any system, any process that you put in place only makes sense if people are willing to, or are encouraged to, or have to abide by that process. If the process is not followed, it becomes meaningless. It loses value. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have now is you have two people who espouse views. How does the layperson know which of those is a credible view? The assumption would be the ijaza. Well, do people read it? Do people, let's be honest, how do you know that one of them has the ijaza and the other one doesn't? Because you'll ask. Well, not most people don't do that. In fact, the research suggests that most people don't even if you sent them 3 pages explaining in detail who you studied with, they won't get past the first page, and the chances are they probably won't even read it. Credibility is defined in marketing terms. The way people determine credibility, believe it or not, and I only
Mm-hmm.
recently learned this myself, is just knowing that there's a process. They don't need to know they don't know the ins and outs of a process. So for example, if I'm creating a system now and I want people to buy into this system, uh, in marketing terms, all I have to do is create a page, and in about 3 or 4 lines tell people what to expect. Apparently, most people, when they come onto this, when they're thinking about purchasing it, they won't even read the document, right? But the interesting thing is they're more likely to buy from you if the document exists. So why do they want a document and yet they don't read it?
Mm-hmm.
And their decision making is influenced by that document. So that tells me something about just credibility, that all they want is some sort of symbol that you're more credible. Now, when it comes to ijazas, like what's stopping two people from having both of them can have an ijaza. One of
Yeah.
them, the deep-rooted ijaza that's taken 20 years to gather, and the other one just kind of picked it off the internet or knocked on somebody's door in Egypt, and got it for 5 minutes of their time. Most people, if we were to use the previous example, most people they would never even ask how long you've been studying for. And even if they do ask, they won't listen. So this whole system, this process is based on idealism. It's when we're being idealistic, we assume that somehow the ijaza makes you credible over others. And in one sense, of course, it does. But when you look at it in real terms and look at it in terms of the nature of how information is just readily available everywhere, unfortunately, that's not how people make their decisions. That's
Mm-hmm.
not how people decide whether your view is credible or not. So then, what are you left with? So how then does somebody on the internet know um, that when they hear two opinions, how do they know that one is more credible than the other? Unfortunately, that's about how you market yourself. That's the sales pitch. You can have two people where one is completely who knows very little about a topic, and the other one that knows it deeply. But if the person that knows very little about it can market it well, that's what you will be attracted to, and people will buy that product
Well,
and buy into that individual.
yeah. Yeah.
Then there's a flip side of this, and this is getting a bit morbid, but the flip side of this is also from the scholar's point of view, which is we then have this there's this implicit notion, understanding that just because you're a scholar that you can comment on everything. Like we
Mm-hmm.
have the right to make these have an opinion about everything, and in one sense, of course, everyone has a right to have an opinion, right? So
Yep.
in one sense that may be okay. The problem is that there's a great amount of responsibility that comes with being a scholar, being recognized as a scholar.
Mm-hmm.
um, Unfortunately, scholars, teachers, students of knowledge, I put myself in these categories, is we don't have a script as to what is within our remit to answer and what isn't. That sounds like a really silly thing to say, but we don't, and that's again looking at just how my own interactions with people and with other scholars and being on various forums is, take COVID for example. You've got
Mm-hmm.
scholars commenting on COVID with very little knowledge about it. They've never stepped foot in a biology class, and yet after reading on the internet they believe that they somehow have a voice that's worth listening to. um, that's a real problem because we do not know where the line is, unfortunately, at times, which
And
actually has an impact on our credibility in the eyes of the layperson.
yeah, yeah, I was just kind of to add to that, a lot of them are the ones who are forwarding these conspiracy theories and
Yeah, yeah.
discussing these things and saying, "Oh, there's not a coincidence between these two things," and
The thing is, comms
etc. So,
comms is very important, and we have to
mhm,
think about these things. Comms, by that I mean communications. Like, we should be thinking about this in not just, is what I'm saying correct? This is how we started this
mhm,
podcast. It's don't spread misinformation, and spreading something that you haven't confirmed is misinformation, which the Prophet
mhm,
ﷺ referred to as a lie. Right. So there's that aspect to it. But the other aspect of it is whether you believe it's true or not, whether it transpires to be true or not. The question is, what's the public perception here? By you
mhm,
putting it out there, what's the impact it can have on people? Right? That's responsibility. Not everything that is not everything that is true needs to be said in an open and public forum. That's basic common sense. Every organization knows this. There's a reason why every major organization has a public board and a private board.
mhm.
If you go to any major organization, they will always have a public board because that's recognizing your responsibility to your community, right?
Yeah,
And there's a forum for them to ask questions and for you to be taken to account.
mhm,
There's always a private board. That's where behind closed doors the discussions happen, things that are not for the public view. That's not to say that it's some conspiracy happening behind the scenes that just where they're discussing how to circumvent. It's that's There are certain things that have to be discussed behind closed doors. It's part of a strategy, and there's a time and place when you share that with the public.
mhm.
That's a basic understanding that actually, I think, as scholars, as teachers, as students of knowledge, that is also being eroded through these
Yeah,
systems. It's very easy to just quickly type something on WhatsApp and it's gone into the internet ether, never to return. And the more, and I guess the other interesting thing about this is it kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy,
mhm,
because it fuels itself. What I mean by that is, if you enter the world of conspiracy, you will become very popular within that niche.
yeah,
um, and when you become popular within that niche, the more you so unfortunately, when you do that, it becomes easier to give more fuel to the fire. And every time you speak, then that, so what you're doing is you're building a network of these individuals. So it's a bit of a dangerous one, because once you enter that world, I think I've spoken about this before in various classes. They may be online, but this idea of the kind of, there's a bubble, there's a echo chamber that is formed.
mhm,
um, so what happens is, when a scholar indulges in conspiracy theory, the moment they do that and they press a button, that is never going to come back. That's entered this world of conspiracy where there are people who will quickly snap it up and spread it, and that will get to other people who have that same mindset. Um, and once that happens, it will, what you see is that world in the internet of people who hold that view.
mhm.
That then further gives you validation, that increases the likelihood of you then further indulging in that. So the more conspiracy so the more you kind of invest in conspiracy, the more conspiratorial you are likely to become, because you've now entered this echo chamber of people that are like-minded. you know and
Okay.
that's quite a scary thought when you look at the
Mhm,
science behind how marketing on the internet works. Yeah. I'd highly recommend a documentary on Netflix, actually, which was fairly recently came out, where you had some of the big bods within the world of social media, Facebook, Netflix, even Google, talking about this very thing. So this isn't a conspiracy. This is from the horse's mouth, and they will tell
mhm.
you how precise marketing is, and how this echo chamber actually works.
Yeah. Um. Okay. So we've discussed the role of the ulama. We've discussed kind of their duties, their responsibilities, the fact that they, whether they like it or not, they've got a voice and they've got a responsibility. Um. And they are meant to be the shepherds of their people, right?
Mm. Mm.
And therefore they have a responsibility to ensure that whatever they say is based upon evidence. And if they do have doubts about things, you know, the public forums, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever, are not the places for that. You can have private meetings about these things and kind of flesh these things out amongst your peers. And then if you've got something concrete and you've got some evidence, and other people think, yeah, you can run with that, then fine. But if you don't, then you don't put it in the public domain. But what about the average Joe? So for instance, you know, someone receives a video about the latest coronavirus vaccine, and they say they're going to use as a mechanism of genetic cloning, and they're going to clone your genes, and they're going to keep it for the future, and they're going to put that into artificial intelligence, and they're going to make 100 different Shammases or a different 100 different Hassans, you know, from those genetics, and they're going to be AI, right? They're going to be robots. Um, what I know this, I know this sounds, but this is what we've seen. Like, I can send you the video. This is what people talk about, and I've received this exact same video 6 times in a row. I've
I
got
mean, this
6 copies of it.
this goes back to, I mean, in terms of scholars, this goes back to the point I was making,
Yeah.
that as people, we shouldn't comment on something we don't know anything about.
Mm,
And sometimes these very notions are pushed and peddled by the scholars as if they
yeah.
have any idea what AI is.
Yeah.
You know, having the faintest clue what AI is. They've watched one documentary. Some of these individuals, they've probably watched one documentary on it, and they've become experts on the topic. Um, and that's just not how this works.
Mm,
Vaccinations, I mean, it's worth just I guess for your listeners' point of view. My background is, I have a couple of masters.
yeah.
One of those is in looking at the role of information within a kind of a public health
Mm,
remit.
yeah.
I've spent a number of years looking at machine learning, have an interest in AI as it happens. So I've got that background in data. Not that I kind of spend all my time thinking about this stuff, but that is, that is part of my background. It's something that
Yeah.
I'm well read on, and I find it hilarious when I see it. And I've seen, and honestly, I wouldn't say so, because I wouldn't say where I've seen it, because there are a number of forums, as in WhatsApp groups that I'm involved in, and I've seen some really interesting discussions, um, coming from individuals that have no idea what this stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that scares me slightly, because on the one hand, the good thing is these are closed groups, and you need to kind of bounce ideas off each other, and
Yeah.
that's how an idea develops, and that's same with anything. So from that side of things, it's positive. What scares me slightly is where those thoughts start. Sometimes it starts off with really wacky ideas. You'll have somebody who will just say, I've heard that this, but by taking this vaccine, somehow you're going to grow a third arm, or something not exactly that, but something silly, as silly as
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, based on no evidence. Um, Unfortunately, what we need to start thinking about is, you know, as teachers and as scholars, teachers of the deen, we should be thinking, sometimes it's not about giving the best opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's, you got to make the best of what you've got. you know Sometimes it's a case of the best out of a bad situation. That's the case when we have to give opinions to people, when there are many teachers out there that face far worse scenarios than I'm sure I ever have to face. But there are cases where you meet people and you think there is no good answer here,
Yeah.
but I can at least attempt to give you something that make your life a bit easier. So you kind of make the best of a bad situation. Um, in the same way, with that same mindset, we should approach things like this vaccine. We can either think there is a conspiracy out there, big pharma is out to get us, right? Or we have to accept that we are in a dire situation, that there is a epidemic, a pandemic out there, and it is, we don't have the data right now to say this definitively, but there is a strong indication that the amount of deaths we're going to have because of because of the rate of suicide is going up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may seem like it's a very small number relative to the population, but just think about how many people out there who have mild depression who are now suddenly stuck at home. They don't have
Yeah.
family members. That's already going up. That's what now that's going to. We don't know what that's going to be like in 3-4 years time. There's a massive impact there. And any life that's taken is, it's too much if there's
Of
something that's
course.
in control. The second thing is we don't understand how the impact it's going to have on delayed cancer diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
So the number of people out there that would have been at a stage 1 who suddenly when they present they're at a stage 4, and it's probably, or they, it's the prognosis suddenly changes because of the situation we're in. We're not talking a few hundred people, we're talking
Yeah.
potentially thousands, and a massive long-term impact on society. The damage it's had on people's livelihoods, the impact it's having, just in terms of policy, in terms of politically, the impact it's having. We've
Mm-hmm.
gone from a democracy that's really been built on this idea of freedom of expression, and everything has been about freedom of and
Yeah.
freedom from. And yet, overnight, a lot of these civil liberties that we've enjoyed and we've kind of have been taken away from us, rightfully so, in that
Mm-hmm.
there's been some necessity, but there's suddenly we've gone to command and control. That will have an impact on the appetite of the nation, when it comes to more potentially. I don't want to be, but potentially, 10 years down the line, we have there will be a society of people who will have experienced what it's like to live under a command and control government. you know
Yeah.
it's taken probably 50 years of that kind of potential movement, right? So we've experienced an extreme form of government in a very short space of time. We don't know what the impact of that is. It may be good, it may be bad, but we don't know. There are some serious things that are happening out there. Um, and in the midst of all of that, you've got big corporations that have the funding, that have the money, that have the backing, and have the incentive, who
Yeah.
now have to knock up a vaccine, which can potentially have a huge impact on people's lives, people with long-term conditions, people with heart disease, diabetes, the things that are impacting Muslims, because predominantly, in the UK, for Southeast Asian, what's impacting us the most. We've got a vaccine that's now being produced, which may not be as effective as they're claiming. It may have some flaws in it. There's some research coming out now about, well, not research, but there's some information that's trying to come out about these vaccines, of information that was being withheld. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got to balance this, as we're not in a situation where we can choose big pharma or leave it. We're in a situation where either you got to face up to the fact that COVID's with us for the foreseeable future, which means in a society of about 60 odd million people, if you lose 0.5% from COVID every year, then just do the maths. That's catastrophic, and there's no point. I mean, I've heard scholars talk about it as if it's the same as flu, and in many ways, you can't even make that comparison,
Yeah.
because they look at it with a very, unfortunately, some of these people with a very narrow single mind, which is, oh, the mortality rate's the same, or it's not far off. There are lots of factors you have to consider,
Mm-hmm.
not just mortality rate. You've got to look at the rate at which flu spreads, and the rate at which COVID spreads. You've got to think about the fact what that can do to the society. We're seeing it already. There are
Mm-hmm.
lots of factors, and we can oversimplify. I guess bringing it back to the point is, when we have scholars who feel that they can, with very little knowledge, comment on these things and put it out into the ether, it's not a surprise that people do it. Why wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
you?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to blame these respected teachers, sheikhs, and I certainly don't have anyone in mind. Just to be
Yeah.
clear, it's just, we've got to start thinking seriously about our responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
as we need to be, not just, it's not good enough. It's a bit like racism. It's not good enough not to be racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to actively stand up against racism, being not. And in the same way, it's not good enough to just not spread misinformation. We have to be very active about the harms of misinformation, and be very acutely, we have to be very sensitive to when we see it around us and nip it in the bud. And
Yeah.
also, we have a responsibility towards our students. So one of the things that I do with my students, particularly my senior ones, is that I'm very I can be very controlling about how they, what they do in the public space. And I do sit them down, and they'll sometimes get an earful from me if it doesn't make sense. If I ever hear, and sometimes you do, a certain student went off and had this discussion with somebody, or this debate with somebody, and they're probably listening now, and they know they get an earful from me, because the way I see it is, this is not about whether you think you're right or wrong. This is about public perception. You've got to
Mhm.
think about whatever you say has an impact out there in society. So you've got to take this responsibility really seriously. We've got to come up with, we, in the absence of somebody clearly marking out what is your role, what you can and can't speak about, what is your specialism, and so on. As you'd find in a PhD. In a PhD, you're a specialist in the very subject that, not even the subject, is really the title of your PhD.
Yeah.
And you've got a good command of the historicity surrounding that PhD. That's your specialism.
Yeah.
You wouldn't dare talk about, just because you know about, something within molecular biology at a very niche level, you wouldn't dare talk about, biology as a whole. Like,
Yeah.
you do that because it just be absurd. Like, you have no knowledge about any of the areas. If anything, you have even less knowledge than probably other people, because you spend so much time focused in a very niche area.
Mhm.
If anything, you have got a skewed view of biology. Um, within our circuit, no such thing in reality exists. If you're a scholar, you're a scholar of the Deen. You're a specialist in theology. You're a specialist in usul. Can you really be a specialist in theology? Can you really be a specialist in usul? Can you really be a specialist in fiqh? We use those terms, and but we use them in by a definition that we've almost kind of we've created ourselves.
Mhm.
As in, every individual, if you ask three people that claim to be specialists in usul, they'll each have their own definition of what a specialist is. You won't necessarily get a uniform definition. um, I don't think, anyway. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not going to claim I'm a specialist in anything. So but I think that's a, that's very different to what you'd find in academia, where actually you have a very defined niche specialism, and people go to you for that, and there's no, you've got no problem saying, look, I don't know this. And I've heard this many times. I've heard
Yeah.
more lecturers in a university setting say, this isn't my area, than I've ever heard scholars say.
Yeah. I mean, as have I. I've sat with
I've said, I don't know.
lecturers and tutors and stuff, and I've asked them questions. One of them be like, to be honest, I don't know. This isn't my speciality.
Yeah.
However, I can direct you to someone else who will know the answer. I mean, whenever we work in professional or corporate environments, you know this yourself. Is just that you've got a point of contact, and you ask them, and they'll be like, "I'm not sure on this, but what I'll do is I'll pass you on to someone else." But I
You
think in
wouldn't,
the scholarly community, you just don't see that. I thought it's like you feel as if you're weak if you pass. For instance, if it was, that a scholar is specialized in marriage cases and divorce law and has experience in that, and someone comes to you with a very technical, complicated question about fostering, and you know you've got foster children, and now you're divorced, and what's going to happen to all of that, and very technical question like that, and from what I've seen is that scholars wouldn't necessarily say, look, this isn't my many of the scholars, I would say, I'm not going to say all of them, but many of them wouldn't hold their hands up and say, this isn't my remit, I don't have experience doing this before. I can tell you what the books say, but that's not really going to be of very much use to you, because you need someone who's dealt with this case and has got experience in it. I'll pass you on to this person.
well,
We don't see that very often.
go and ask five scholars what their
Mm,
view is of COVID, and you'll get five views. You won't get five I
mm,
don't know. And it may well be, I say this confidently, purely because any comments I'm making about this is because of my professional work, not
mhm.
necessarily because of my I have, the only, I guess, the role of a scholar when it comes to something like a pandemic is really to encourage people and remind them of that this is not unique to us. This has been
Yeah.
something that's been around for, we've seen pandemics for, from the beginning of time. They've always been there. We have examples of it in the time of the Prophet, in the time of the Khulafa, and thereafter. And what we do is we try and extract lessons from those. How did we use that time positively to build our relationship with God? That is the
Mm-hmm.
remit of the scholars, to try and encourage people to like use this as a time to reconnect to God. That's where we need to be. What we don't want to be doing is then start giving all sorts of stats about how COVID is a bit like flu. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Or or sell up and move to Turkey or whatever. That sort of advice is not really for us. In the same way as you said, I can't ever imagine going to a family law solicitor and him giving me advice about my conveyancing. They just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, well, it makes you think, isn't it? Why don't they? There's a certain confidence they have and a belief they
Mm-hmm.
have in their knowledge. So part of this has to be something to do with an insecurity that we have, right? There's an insecurity that
Yeah.
exists. Again, a bit of a void, you could say, where because scholars can't define scholars, society can't define scholars. So if in the absence of a definition, you kind of make your own definition.
Yeah.
And the thing with that definition is, it's the nature of any definition. It has to be what we say jami and mani. It has to be comprehensive and it has to be exclusive, right? When
Mm-hmm.
it comprehensive, meaning it has to cover the scope of what you're about, and it has to be exclusive in that it has to be, once you've defined something, then that's a definition of the thing you're defining. It can't also be a definition of something else. It kind of loses its exclusivity. A chair is a chair by virtue of it being having the characteristics of a chair. It can't then also be a table, right? So there has to be some distinction about whatever it is that you define. So if scholars can't define scholars and people can't define scholars, and then we then self-define, the moment then our remit, there isn't a remit. It's just whatever we at the time think is the remit. But the thing is, every time somebody asks a question which would ordinarily be out of our remit, we
Mm-hmm.
kind of just stretch out our remit a bit and just respond to it, and we kind of shoehorn in the fact that as long as we can somehow eventually bring it back to God, it's justified, that particular response that we've given. When actually we should say, I don't know, but I do know a man that does. you know, it's understanding that there is a remit that we have, and I'm talking about. I mean, I should make there is a within scholarship, you can be a generalist. There's
Yeah.
no harm. Like a GP is a generalist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you go to a specialist, they'll say, a specialist, I don't know, oncologist. He will say, well, what GPs? They always get it wrong. They just make all these referrals to us, and 9 times out of 10, we've just got to ship it back. Right? What do they know? Whereas a GP will say, what do we know? An oncologist knows everything there is to know about one small thing. We know, we have a breadth of understanding over of every part from the head down to the toes, right? So we have a lot more knowledge from, so a GP, a generalist, has a lot of information, but they don't have, I guess, the depth that you'd expect from an oncologist. An oncologist has a lot of depth in but one particular area. They don't, even though they've done the studies, that's
Mm-hmm.
not really, they wouldn't start talking about why it is that you haven't got sensation in your toe, right?
Okay.
In the same way, we have generalists within scholarship. The majority of scholars would fall into that category. We have a good reasonable understanding of fiqh, of aqidah, of theology, of various topics. And then there is those specialist questions, and those specialist questions, to a large extent, are beyond our remit. We need to be able to make referrals to say, this isn't me. If you've got an issue with your marriage breaking down, this is not something that I specialize in, but I do know a woman that can. I do know a man that can. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm having severe mental health issues, I am
Mm-hmm.
not going to give you a taweez. I'm going to send you to somebody who knows a bit of, can help you maybe with a bit of counseling and maybe make a referral, or at least I will encourage you to go to your GP, and so
Yeah.
on. And I think the same goes for these sorts of, anything like this, anything that's outside the scope of scholars. You just got to get better at saying, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really I think it's a pertinent message across the board. I think generally for, of course, for ulama just saying I don't know, and but what I'll do is I will focus on what I do know, and that is giving you reminders, bringing you closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, inshallah, um,
Mm.
and making this time a time of reflection for you. And as the individual, instead of spending our time with conspiracy theories and winning debates on Twitter about what the government's trying to do with us, or spending your time, forwarding these WhatsApp messages. It is a time for us to learn about the religion. It is a time for us to learn about the faith. We're stuck in, we say we're stuck in our homes, but it's a time for us to connect with our families. And there are so many things that we could be doing. And one of the things that we could be doing that we are going to discuss just now is this cracking new course that you've brought out. And I'm actually really excited. You can see the noise levels, the decibels have gone up even in when I'm talking about this fantastic new course called the Arabic Journey that you've released. And just looking at it, I've seen it. I've seen the behind the scenes stuff. It's fantastic. So tell us about it. Tell us about what the Arabic Journey is,
Yeah,
and what can we expect from it.
yeah, yeah. So the Arabic journey is a let me start with where it came from. The idea came from I've been teaching now on sacred text for a number of years, and the question I ask all my students when they start is why are you studying Arabic? What is your reason for studying Arabic? And invariably the same answer, I get the same answer. I'm studying it because I want to get closer to the Quran, get close to God.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think I've ever heard another answer actually, and it may be because that's what they feel they ought to say. But it's been constant for 7 years now. I get the same answer. It's because I want to connect to the word of Allah. I want to connect to Allah. So I want to get
Mhm.
closer. I want to be able to listen to the Quran in Taraweeh, and I want to be able to enjoy it and understand it. Um, Now, in the traditional syllabus, the syllabus, the sacred text syllabus is a kind of a modern slant to modern take on the traditional Nizamiya syllabus. So we've tried to update it as much as we possibly could. Um, but we still had our basic, our grammar, our introductory Arabic was still quite it's grammar heavy. It's got we cover morphology, we cover syntax and so on. But a lot of that's happening in it's removed from the Quran, in that we
Mhm.
go to the text and we study each of these separately, and then we almost like you're ready now we can take you to the Quran. But I started to think, is there a way of combining the two, you know, where we can actually go straight to the Quran and learn your grammar, learn your morphology through the Quran. And that way you are doing both. You're much
Mhm.
more interested in learning verbs when you're learning the Quran. You're reading a verse of Quran and you're learning what that verb is, and you're learning how to construct verbs like it. And all the vocabulary that you're learning is Quran centric.
Yeah.
All the grammar you're learning is focused on the Quran. So I started to devise something, and as I was putting it together, I suddenly thought to myself, how much of what we teach is even necessary? And what I mean by that is how much of, if we take an 80-20 rule, right?
Mhm.
If we look at, I thought if I start with all the rules that are most commonly used, and then I order them by most common to least common,
Mhm.
and then of those see which of those appear most in the Quran. I was, I was surprised. I was really surprised when I found that actually I only use about 20%. That really surprised me. And the same went with verbs. I realized that I only needed to know just a small number of rules, and I suddenly know all I need to know in terms of being able to engage with the Quran at a basic to
Yeah.
intermediate level. Um, so I started putting this thing together, and before I knew it, I suddenly had 9 rules, and I thought these 9 rules. If you understand these 9 rules, you understand verb structures. You have everything you need to engage with verbs. Verbs, people find verbs the hardest, morphology the hardest.
Yeah.
How do you,
It's
construct and deconstruct
yeah.
verbs? Meaning, um, I thought if I can consolidate that into nine rules, like 9 rules, that's not that hard. Especially if we can consolidate 9 rules into 10-minute lessons, And then, and this is one of the things that we did, is each of those 9 rules, create a 30-second animation explaining the rule to you. So 9 rules, 9 animations, 30 seconds each. Suddenly the rules are done. I thought, can we do the same with grammar? And again,
Now
same
you
thing.
see why I'm smiling, people. I mean, now you see why I'm smiling when you hear this. Sorry.
So no. So then we looked at grammar, and it was a similar sort of thing. We found 15 rules. Just learn these 15 rules, and you literally have everything you need at a very basic, at a basic level. And by
Hmm.
basic, I mean learn the vocabulary. And when you hear the Quran, you can start to really engage it and understand it. That it's not, it doesn't seem so much of a foreign language anymore.
Yeah.
Um, so we took these 15 rules in grammar, the 9 rules in verbs, and then we thought, we've got to make sure every single lesson is engaging, it's Quran focused. I never want to move away from the Quran,
Hmm.
so I made a point of, with some, help from a number of students, that every single lesson should always have a central Quranic verse, right?
Okay.
And whatever you explain is explained through the Quran. And then I thought, that so now we've got a 2 modules that give you all the grammar that you need. You're all of it's Quran focused. There's lots of verses. There's all the vocabulary that you need, to be honest, to just get going. Is
Hmm.
I thought, icing on the cake. Let's actually create a 3rd module called an application module. And here, there's nothing new that you learn. It's just taking everything that you know, but applying it to some meatier, bigger verses. Like take the Ayatul Kursi. Go through it, go
Hmm.
through full surahs from the 30th juz, like Surah Nas, Surah Al-Asr, and start interacting with those surahs. And do you know what that word is? Do you know where it comes from? Is this a verb? How do you know it's a verb? Where did you study it in a morphology module? And the idea behind that is, then after you've completed this, is that you now have some independence. You have
Yeah.
the tools that you need to now, with a bit of experience and practice, you can independently now start to engage, as a listener, as a person that listens to the Quran. You can engage with it at that level at least, and hopefully enjoy it. And that became what we then, that became the Arabic journey, because I realized it was a journey. You start somewhere, and you kind of, your engagement with the Quran increases, and you feel like it's a bit like a, we initially started off with this mountain theme, which is, the first mountain you come across is the idea of learning Arabic, and it looks huge. And
Hmm.
sometimes all you got to do is just step back, and when the further you go, the more, I guess, it becomes like, if you're looking out at somebody looking at a mountain, the further back you go, the kind of the smaller the mountain
Hmm.
almost looks. But when you stand next to it, not even it doesn't even look small. It looks, you can see the peak, and therefore you can conquer it.
Yeah.
Um, when you're right at the foot of the mountain, you don't see that peak. So what I wanted to do was create something where it clearly lays out your whole journey for you, and that's what it became, an Arabic journey. You can see exactly where you start off. You're far enough in the distance to see the mountain, exactly what it's made up of, and what you see is 3 very small peaks. Understand verbs, understand how the Arabic grammar works, and apply. If you do all of that, then you have what we call the Arabic journey. So that was what it was, and I wanted to make it available to our students, our year 1 students, because I thought it'd accelerate their learning, and I know you're in that cohort, and that means also, from a personal point of view, is if I can, I believe you can learn a lot of your basic grammar through something like the Arabic journey. What
Hmm.
that then means is that we can, when you come into my classroom, if you want to have live classes in a classroom environment, we can have much more focused study, where actually you're using our skills, what we can offer. So you've exhausted what you're able to do. Now it's, let's take it to that next level. Um, so yeah, that's the Arabic journey.
Yeah. Well, it is as good as it sounds. I will say that I've seen it in action. I've seen the videos are fantastic. The teacher's great, Ustad Anika, and she's as Sheikh Shammas was saying, surf is something which people generally find the most difficult because it is quite abstract compared to the English language, and it's not something you can get around just with vocabulary. Sometimes you can kind of get around grammar just by having enough vocab.
Yeah.
But surf is definitely not that. You need to be able to conjugate the verbs correctly, and also the little subtle differences that you'll find will totally change the meaning.
Mm.
And this was a fantastic course to help with that. But also, I think, the biggest thing is the fact that it's online. It's at your own pace. You can watch the videos as many times as you like, over a period of 2 years. And do you want to just talk to us a little bit about what support systems the students have? Are there support systems for them?
Yeah. So what I wanted to do is I didn't want to make it completely hands off, and the reason
Mm-hmm.
for that is, it's taken us over a year to develop. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking, daily and then weekly meetings, going through it step by step. And so this is the product of a lot of work. But I'm a big believer in no syllabus. Just you don't never create something and just leave it and marvel at it from a distance. You've got to
Yeah.
constantly treat it as it's a living thing. You just got to keep amending it and changing it and progressing. So I wanted to have a feedback loop. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I have people on the Arabic journey, I still consider them my students, people that are going to, I want to be able to engage with. So, for that reason, we created a group, a WhatsApp group, and that means anyone who joins the course automatically gets enrolled into this group. So, you have live help. You've got Ustaz Anika on there, who's the teacher who recorded all of this. And I really wanted to make sure that I had a sister kind of leading on this, because she's a fantastic, a teacher, a very a good role model, a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, a dentist by profession, extremely busy woman. I really wanted someone who can model some of those, hopefully for people out there, and particular sisters, but for everyone, to just show you that that you can achieve a lot regardless of your personal circumstances. And they,
Yeah.
so she achieved a lot. She studied sacred text with us. So on this WhatsApp group, she'll be on there, myself, Sheikh Sajjad, and a few others, teachers that are available on hand. If you ever get stuck, you can ask a question. So that's the one thing that we've got, and your community is on there, which means you can kind of interact with each other freely. The other thing that we've got is, periodically we run webinars. So anyone that joins the Arabic Journey program, you'll be first to hear about it. It'll be on advertised in the WhatsApp group, and that's just a chance to, it's what we call a Ask Me Anything AMA, which means at any point, if you're stuck, wait for the next webinar, come on board and ask away, and we will clarify. We just had our one recently, actually, just a few days
Okay.
ago. So that's something else that we've got available for you guys, inshallah.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of support available, and also the resources. They're available for 2 years. 2 years, you get access to it if you sign up for the course.
Yeah, it's two
Yeah.
years, but again, I'm not putting any. If people were really struggling, and at the end of 2 years, just get in touch with us. It's not
Yeah.
like 2 years and that's it. The aim of this is that I really do want people to engage with the Quran and connect with the
Hmm.
Quran. And I saw a lot of courses out there. Some were good, some were kind of fly by night courses. So to be honest, I saw a demand, a need there, and I wanted to really fill that with something that's of good quality. And I have to also say there was a lot of there was some pressure, good pressure, not necessarily negative pressure, but a lot of people saying, look, it's good enough, put it out there, even 6 months ago. But
Yeah.
I've held it back because I wanted to make sure it's as ready as possible. So this is about, this is people who are interested. If you're interested in studying Arabic and this sounds like it's for you, people can go onto the website, inshallah, get in touch
Yeah.
with us. We can arrange a conversation if need be. And if it's something that's not for you, that's okay too. Watch there's a live a free lesson that you can access. It may not be for you, in which case get in touch anyway, and let's see if we can support you in finding a program that is suitable for you, inshallah.
Yeah. Inshallah. No, it's so you can find all the information on www.arabicjourney.org. It's in the ticker below. And I would really emphasize, just check it out. And like we were saying before, is that, look, we've got a purpose in our life, is to know God and to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And uh, one of the best ways of doing that is connecting with the words of Allah. And this is a way that we can do that. um, and it really is a great syllabus that's been created. And I just want to kind of add a personal reflection to this, is that, you know learning those skills and being able to open the Quran and then being able just with the dictionary to unpack some of your favorite surahs after only 40 lessons is I mean, you can't put a price on that, right? And that feeling of being able to understand the Quran, that feeling of being able to really engage with it on a deeper level, um, is something which we should all strive to be doing, inshallah. So please do check this course out. And there is actually an offer on. The offer code is 25 today for 25% off the course. That's 25 today for 25% off the course. Um, so it's really well priced, and there's loads and loads of resources on it. Like I said, you can watch the videos as much as you want. There's quizzes on it, there's animations on it, there's like I said, Sheikh Shammas has just mentioned the fact that you have a WhatsApp group with the teachers which you can ask them questions on. They've got live webinars which you can ask questions on. There's a real support network. It's not just like we've left you to your own devices and there you go and go off with it. There's a real support network there behind it, and I think that's so important. One of the things that a lot of people kind of think of, yeah, it's online learning, so I won't get the same experience. What they've tried to do here is give you a really good experience, and somewhat sometimes I think even a better experience, because Arabic for us is of course a foreign language for many of us, and therefore sitting in a class sometimes we will forget things. Sometimes we might not necessarily take in everything that the teacher is saying. But if you've got this on a video and you can go and watch that back 4, 5, 6 times, many times as you need to understand that concept, you can. There's no problem in doing that. And even if you don't, you've always got access to go back to the teachers and ask them. I think that's such a crucial point to make. It really is. So, like I said, I'm really excited about the course. I hope yourselves join, and really as a community, I've had other guests on, alhamdulillah, and we've always discussed their projects, and the reason why is just to show you how many amazing things there are out there which you can get involved in. Because I just remember, and I'll share this with you, I'm sure Sheikh Sajjad won't mind this, but he was just talking about, in our previous class, that look, you have to be learning, you have to be studying, you cannot be just idle. That's not our job in this world. Our job in this world is to know Allah and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is our job, to do that. So if we can take time out, to discuss conspiracy theories, if we can take time out to open the books up when we need to debate someone, as Sheikh Shammas was mentioning previously, if we can take time out to do all of those kind of things, then definitely we can take time out to try and understand the words of Allah. um, so please do check it out. Like I said, the you can see it at the bottom of the screen, arabicjourney.org. The offer is 25 today for 25% off, and there's free lessons as well. So just check them out. There's no there's no issue, and they're not gonna, you're not tied to anything. You can just check them out, see if it's for you. Inshallah, I think it will be. I think this is a real course for absolutely everyone. But you can make that mind up for yourself by checking it out. So it's a really fantastic initiative and a fantastic course, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows people to benefit from it, and that we connect to the Quran through the learning that takes place in this course, inshallah. And finally, just to say thank you to Sheikh Shammas for taking his time out. He's obviously very busy, and this is the launch of this course. And as he said, it could have been out there 6 months ago, but he's put in that extra effort, and that takes time. As he's mentioned, he's got a full-time job as well, on top of teaching his students, on top of developing courses. He's got a full-time job, and that's why we should really appreciate the ulama, and when they produce content like this, appreciate the fact that they've taken so much time out to produce content like this. We should, inshallah ta'ala, at the very least, we should try and put that effort into at least just check it out and see, is this for me? So yeah, just thanks, Sheikh Shammas, for taking your time out, and inshallah we'll see you on the next podcast. So take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Sorry.